Welcome to the 12-Step Recovery Evolution podcast. Visit recoveryevolution.co.uk for more episodes, helpful resources and links to our social media. Also visit the site for information on how you can attend a future Zoom session or workshop live. Thank you.
Congratulations everyone on good news. It's a difficult time we're in without a shadow of a doubt, but it's kind of thinking about, just sitting here looking at everybody. We've probably got 40, 41 people in recovery listening together. So we're all coming together to help each other this morning to stay sober. And I was thinking how we're all sort of also isolated at home, and the reason for that is to help the NHS and the services that are heavily overloaded at the moment. But also like to bring into that, imagine if us lot were all drinking and taking drugs now. Imagine how much more damage and carnage would be going on in the world and in the NHS and all the services that we start to drain when we're out there drinking and using. So, staying sober, if nothing else, is a massive service to this world. And that's something that I've always sort of had on my gratitude list, because I'm a believer that I'm not cured of this illness, and God knows I know that on a daily basis, because what can go on in my head and in my emotions and the struggles that I can that still face and have to work through. But I'm so grateful that it's kind of funny. It's like one of the things that when my sister died, when I was quite into recovery, and it was a really difficult time, and she died of brain tumours, and we was round the hospital bed as she was dying. And when she finally died, I just never knew how that felt. I'd lost kind of grandparents, but it didn't really cause me too much emotional problem. But when my sister died, it was just like my whole family went into this other world where she wasn't there, and it brought so much stuff up. But the moment that she died, the first thing that entered into my head wasn't for a drink or a drug, it was gratitude. Because again, obviously I couldn't do anything to prevent her death. I was just grateful that as a son, as a brother, as an uncle, as a brother-in-law, that that I could be there sober and clean. And this image come through my mind of if I wasn't like that, stumbling through that door at my sister's death with all my family and making it all about me. And I felt that, even though I was going through my own trauma, recovery allowed me, and God and the spiritual belief allowed me to be there for my family, to be there for my nieces, to be there for, other people. And I thought that was a great privilege in life, that I can't stop the difficulties happening in life, because that's life. But I just want to be present in that, and I want to be a good man, and I want to be the best person I can be, and supporting people going through whatever they go through. And, and I'm very grateful to all the people that when I'm going through that hold my hand and put their hand on my back and tell me that I'm a good man and everything's okay, because I've learned that no matter how much spirituality I've got, I know that the angels can come in the form of whoever's standing next to you, just putting their hand on your back and saying, "You'll be all right, son, it'll be all right." And so don't underestimate the power of, the fact that we're all sober today. And, we can't stop all the difficult things happening, but we're not going to be the person that are falling around drunk, causing everybody more problems than they've already got. That we get an opportunity to be of service. And again, as you work through the program, you kind of get to that step 9. And I haven't asked Sonia yet, but I'm sure she's going to say yes. But I was going to ask her on Saturday to do a group that we often do called Creative Amends. And it's how we believe that amends is, when you sort of realise it's not just going around saying sorry, but amends is where we become of maximum service to God and others. And I think that's when you're really owning an experience. That's when you really feel alive. You know, the time I feel God the most is like now, actually, when you're reaching out. And, you know, even when you just stand up in a meeting because you see a newcomer come in, or somebody that's talking too much because they're a bit distressed, and you just go and make them a cup of tea and put a cup of tea in front of them, put your hand on their shoulder and say, welcome. That's the time that I really feel God the most, in that small stuff, not always the super duper stuff, but just them little kind acts that we can do for each other. And so I just wanted to share that with you. So for you guys that have just come on, we've kind of been doing on awakening, really, and I've kind of not feel that I've digressed from that, but you know, the on awakening has got certain instructions about things that we should do in the morning, and we can go over that again. But it's kind of took me back to looking at step 1, 2, and we was just actually having got to step 3, and the reason for that was excuse me, because we realised that the on awakening is asking us to search out certain wrong motives in our mind. So thought it might be nice for this week just to go a little bit deeper in what are the wrong motives. And when you come into recovery and you start working through the steps, and the step 3 is kind of lining you up for step 4, and the step 4 is the kind of where you start digging deeper into them wrong motives and the things that have been causing us to have problems, and it starts to identify self and what it is, this thing that we're trying to identify and be rid of, this bondage, it says, that we're trying to be free of. So we got to the step 3 pair. So I sort of set the task that, you know, we've kind of agreed that, you know, it says as we come to the end of the ABCs that being convinced that we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will, and for those who don't know, that's our thinking, and our lives is our actions, you know, what we do, and your actions usually precede your thinking. We've decided to turn our will and our life over to the care of God, and it's asked, what do we mean by that? And then we've talked through page 62 about that we're driven by this hundreds of forms of fear and self-delusion, and is saying, right, now we need to learn to start identifying that. We need to start looking at ourselves and stop looking at the world, and start seeing where this self is coming from, because we need to start disarming it and divorcing ourselves from that relationship with self. So the homework was to decide whether you actually want to do that, whether you want to do it in this format, in this 12-step format, which is proposing this idea of God or a higher power as something that you may be willing to hand your life over, rather than keep handing your life over to this inner self, this lower self, this ego, this destructive thought process which seems to govern our lives, certainly when we're in addiction. And you know, again, it's important, I guess, just to stop here and say that the drinking and the drugs are not really the problem. Drinking and the drugs are the solution, the self-medication for this self problem, because it's saying that self is the root of all our problems, not drugs and alcohol is the root of our problems, but this self is the root of our problem. So when you ask somebody to stop taking drugs or stop drinking, but not offering them any other solution for their suffering that's being caused by self, then you're just taking away the painkiller and leaving the cause of the pain. This is program saying, let's remove the cause of the pain, and then there'll be no need for the painkiller. And so, as self is the root of our problems, we need to be identified, we need to be free from it. It says we need to die to self. And the way we die from it is we learn to starve it. We learn to stop feeding it. We learn to stop empowering it. And I think that was quite a difficult thing for me to accept, that I'm the one that gives it power. I'm the one that gives it power. See, there's a bit of a thing where I've kind of got a little bit of a uh, disagreement with the big book, because it says there is one that has all power, and that way is God may you find him now. Now, I don't really believe that anymore. I kind of believe that through choice, God has given me a portion of power. Of course, I don't run the universe. I don't run my internal organs. I don't make my hair grow or my fingernails grow. They just seem to do that on their own. So the only power I have over them is I can cut them, but I can't really stop them growing. But so I have a certain amount of power through choice. And we know that when we're in addiction, we kind of lose that power of choice. But that's being restored to me. You know, God's given me back that choice, as it says in the book, you know, that once we get this, once we get that power, it feels like the problem's been removed. We're not resisting it. We're not fighting. It just doesn't exist for me. Do I want to drink today? No, I don't. I'm not. It's not. It's just not a problem for me. I don't drink. Alcohol has a terrible effect on me. I can't control it. I can't handle it. I'm an alcoholic. I'm allergic to it. And if I take one drink, I can't seem to stop it or control it. So, you know, the 12-step program it is abstinent based, but it is about controlling your drinking, controlling your drug taking. But the only way I can control it is to not do it. So it is controlled. I do control drinking. I haven't had a drink in 29 years. I control it by not doing it. But I can't just choose not to do it. I have to work this program, and then that gives me the power to choose not to do it. That places me in this position of neutrality. And so as long as I work my program on a daily basis, I'm in a position of neutrality, and the drink issue isn't a problem for me. Drugs isn't a problem for me. And if ever there's ever any temptation, which there never is, I just recoil from it as if from a hot flame. So I've been given that power back. That power belongs to me, the power of choice. So that means that, you know, that I have to take responsibility. And that's not always been an easy thing for myself, because I wanted everyone else. You know, I come from quite a dysfunctional family, and I think when that happens, you realise that your parents probably aren't the most responsible, and then you become overly responsible, and then you want, you know, you spend a lot of your life trying to get other people to take responsibility, or you become over responsible. And but through this program, there's certain things that I realise I am responsible for, and I'm certainly responsible for my spiritual health and my mental health and my physical, and you know, um, all the other areas I can't really blame anybody else for. So the step 3 is kind of saying, look, this is a barely but a beginning. It's saying when we do this step 3 prayer, we're just trying to get the relationship right. We're just trying to get the relationship where, you know, that I'm entering into this relationship where I'm going to follow this teaching, that I'm going to put the principles that I'm learning, these spiritual principles, before my own desires. In actual fact, I think, you know, what I learned was freedom isn't doing what you want to do. It's doing what you ought to do because you want to do it. So I kind of want to do God's will today. I want to do this program today. And when I'm making my decisions, which is, you know, I can decide to do whatever I like because I've been given that freedom by God, by the universe, by whatever you want to believe in, to make decisions. I decide whether I want to turn left or I want to turn right and what I'm going to do. And I take full responsibility. And as we say, ignorance is no defense. And so this is asking me to take that power back and to start to take some responsibility for my life, but then hand over the running of my life to this direction and this idea, to clean up my thought process, to clean up my decision making, to start cutting off behaviours and options that are not favouring my life, that are coming out of myself, that are coming out of my fear, that are coming out of my guilt, that are coming out of my shame, and identifying that. And that is an ongoing journey. I mean, not every decision that I make is super spiritual or anything like that. And even today, woke up feeling a bit tired and a bit frustrated, and done a bit of ranting, a bit of raving before I finally got my head together and got into my program and stopped going by my fear and stopped going by my frustration, and then start handing myself over to the care of God as I understand him. And I feel myself calming down, and I feel my thought process start to change, and it's not okay for me to be like that. This is how I like to be more peaceful and a little bit more measured. But I have to accept myself. I've always been that way. I've always been a bit ranty here and a ranty there, and not always been able to get on top of that. But I accept that there's a defect still in my character that I've had to accept. I wish they weren't there. I wish they would just go away. I wish there was some button that I could just push and they would all disappear. But I haven't discovered that yet. If you have, I'd be glad to hear it. But I'm still in the human experience, and the truth is, I learn a lot from that. It seems to be that the pressure builds in my life when I'm getting closer to a truth, and and I accept that I have to go through difficulties sometimes to actually get to the other side of whatever it is that's keeping me in self. But often coming out of self can be quite a difficult task, and again, that's another story when you work in rehab, that you see a lot of people that you're asking them to deal with themselves, but their self is so traumatized or so hurt that it becomes very difficult for them to do. So always try and be as sort of kind and as welcoming, and making it so that it's a lot easier for people to deal with their difficulties, but also keeping the bar high enough to make people have to stretch enough to be able to walk through it. Anyway, so we're going to do the step 3, and I'm going to say the prayer out. And if you want to do the prayer, the mics are off, so nobody can hear you. You can do the prayer with us. If you've never done the step 3 before, and you're thinking that you understood them 3 pertinent points, that A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives, B, that probably no human power could relieve our alcoholism, and then God could and would if he was sought, and being convinced you're at step 3. And that's just making a decision. And a decision's like an indecision. We're just cutting off other options. So when I made this decision, I decided that I'm no longer going to be somebody that's just going to keep giving myself to this unhealthy self. That I'm going to start practicing this spiritual program of action. And, again, when you're new at it, you make all kinds of mistakes and you struggles. I mean, I've been doing it for let's say 29 years. So I've kind of got a lot better at it. But still, there's always more to go. But so it's just the beginning. It's kind of like you're saying, this is just the arch. This is the arch which we're going to walk through. This is how we're getting that relationship right, where we're putting God before ourselves, and we're gonna go on this journey. I always kind of see it like this: is that if there's like like a plane crashed up in a mountain or in a jungle or something, and they know that, like somebody like me is like, the area, the jungle, and they say, has this plane crashed in this jungle? Would you go in there, and would you get the people to come out? And I often think, imagine if that was a group of like people that are alcoholics and that, and they've crashed in this plane, and you kind of gone in the jungle, and you know the way out because you've got the maps, you've got the compass, you know the terrain, you know the area, and you kind of know the way out. And so you go in there, you find them, you find out where they've crashed, and you said, right, guys, it's like you're obviously in a bit of a crash here. You're bumping into poisonous plants, and you're eating things you shouldn't be eating, and you're banging your head on branches, and it's a difficult terrain to get out of. And but I know the terrain, and if you want to follow me, I've got the map, I've got the compasses, I've also got the experience. If you want to come out of that terrain, then I'm your guide. And do you want me to show you your way out? So they'll go, yeah. And then you say, well, let's go this way. Now, half of them are going to go, well, that's just your opinion. That's just your opinion. It's like, no, it's not. It's written here. I'm not telling you. I'm telling you my opinion of what's written here, possibly, but it's directions. It's clear-cut, precise directions, and it's very difficult to get people to follow the path. And then they start arguing about the path, and it's like, oh man, it's more about an experience. So my challenge is to at least try it the way that it's written, and then once you've actually done it the way that it's written and got to the other end of it and gone, well, that was a load of rubbish, it didn't work, then reject it. But you've got to be a bit of a fool to reject it before you've even tried it. And it sounds silly, but that's quite an experience that you have quite a lot when you're just trying to get people to follow this simple program of action. They start calling you a fanatic and Taliban, and it's suggested, and you're like, oh man, just give it a go. So if you want to do this, then you can do the step 3, and as we're reading through it, that can be your step 3 prayer. Some people like to do it on their knees, some people like to do it standing up, sitting down. It says you don't even have to use these words, you can use whatever words you like, as long as they're kind of what's the word it says, as long as it's kind of voicing the ideas in this, that we're trying to realize that it's this self that we're trying to identify. So I'm going to say the prayer, I'm going to read it out, and if you want to read it out too, then that can be your step 3. If you haven't done it, that's fine, and you can move on. So it says, now we're at step 3. Many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thy will. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. We thought well before taking this step, making sure that we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. So if you said that and you sincerely meant that's your step 3 done. And it says now, it's best that we take this with a friend or spiritual advisor, but it's better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. The wording, of course, was quite optional, as long as we expressed the idea of voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect was sometimes a very great one we felt at once. So again, this is about saying, as we go back, that we can't be, this believes that we can't be completely free from self without God's help. So this 3rd step is saying, God, help me be free from this bondage of self. But it's also entering us into this relationship. It's kind of like signing up now with the French Foreign Legion. I've signed up to the French Foreign Legion. You're kind of now joining the army. And this is kind of what this is about. It's about now saying that you're in the 12-step fellowship. And so now we're going to ask you to follow other instructions. Because just doing that, handing your life over to God, is just the beginning. Now he's going to say, now I'm going to lead you. Now I'm going to direct you. I'm going to take you on this path. And that's why it's saying how important it is to get this relationship right. To say now that we've got a guide, we've got something to follow. Now I follow a program. I follow the Bible and I follow my higher power. And I spend most of my life trying to discover what the orders are for me. What should I do here? What should I do there? What do I do about this? What do I do about that? So it's saying next. Now the next instruction is, next we launch on a course of vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. So I'm going to go a little bit into this, step 4, because again, on awakening, it's kind of like an ongoing step 4. I mean, even though we call it step 4, it's actually just a process that we're learning, that because it's saying that in our minds we've got no natural defense against self. It says it, look, no human power can relieve our alcoholism. So nobody outside can seem to tell us how to get out of self. And look, when we work with a lot of people's parents, they often are bewildered because they know if you did what your mum told you, you'd do really well. So no human power can relieve our alcoholism. And it's not in our mind. It's not naturally in our mind. It's something we're going to have to build in manually. So with this program is saying there's something missing in your head. I don't think anyone want to argue with that, because people have probably been saying to that to you all your life. There's something missing in your head. And there is. There's the ability to overcome self. And so this program is saying, look, that's not going to change, but we can build it in manually. If you practice this program, that bit that you're missing that helps you resist this urge to follow self, no matter how destructive, no matter how much you don't want to keep doing what you do, you don't have the power to do it. But that's not naturally in you. That's something that we need to build in. So if you don't follow this program and you've got this problem and you keep struggling on your own and trying to use yourself to overcome yourself, then you're probably not going to do very well. If you do actually overcome yourself without this program, then you've probably not got this problem in the first place, because it means you've got it already in your head to be able to do that. So it says, which many of us have never attempted. Now, doing inventory is a tough thing. Even people that are not in recovery struggle with this, because it means looking at yourself. Now, I've done the steps with people that aren't in recovery. Now, when we do this 3-month course that we have, if I have 25 people in recovery come on the course, at the end of the course, I've usually got 18 to 22 people still there at the end, which is, quite an achievement after 12 weeks. When I do that course with people that aren't in recovery, I don't have anybody there at the end. In actual fact, they usually all start bailing out round about step 4. And last time I did it, there was only one person there by step 5, and the only reason they were there is because it was their house I was doing it in. So it's not an easy thing for people to look at themselves. It's a very profound practice that I wish everybody would learn, because the world would certainly be a better place if people learn to look at themselves instead of blaming each other all the time. So it says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, which is step 3, it would have little or permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. So we're going to look for the things that have been blocking us off from this higher power, this God, this spirit. It's a liquor, but a symptom. So that's kind of saying what I was saying there. That alcohol is just a symptom. It's not the cause of the problem. It's just a symptom of the problem. It's what we do to self-medicate, to try and stand ourselves, to be able to deal with the pain that's coming out of ourselves, that's being caused by ourselves. And it says, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. So it's saying, look, we've got to go on this journey of, we've got to find out what the causes and conditions are, because if we don't do this and we don't identify the causes and the conditions, we're going to carry on suffering even in recovery. And you can see people that are suffering in recovery because they're still eating that fruit of resentment, and the bitterness and the sourness is coming out of them, and the discontent and the irritability is coming out of them, because they're not getting down to the causes, and they're still suffering from this mental, spiritual condition, but they've not got any relief from the alcohol, and they become what we call the dry drunk. And you can get a lot of mental illnesses if you don't get down to the causes and conditions. So it says, therefore, we started on this personal inventory. This was step 4. Business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. You know what? It took me years to understand what that meant, funny enough. No one ever explained it to me, so I'm going to explain it to you. And I think Eliza will probably relate to this. It's saying, look, if you've got a business, like a shop, if you've got like a food shop, if you imagine that you're a food shop and you're a shopkeeper and you've been out drinking all day, you don't go in the shop, you might stand at the checkout trying to get money off people, but you've not been in that shop for years. And so he's saying you liken yourself to a shop, and now we're going to do a stock take of your what you've acquired over the years. So we're going to get a pen and paper, and we're going to go in your shop. That's what the step 4 is. And we're going to do a stock take. We're going to see if you've got rotten fruit in there, rotten veg, out-of-date materials. You know, you've got old shopping trolleys, tyres. You've got people camping in your shop. You don't know what you got in your shop, but it's a mess. And so we're going to go in that shop and we're going to do a stock take. Now, the step 4 is the stock take. Once we've done a good stock take, then through the rest of the steps, then we're going to make a plan of what we're going to do about that, and how we're going to clean that mess up, and how we're going to get your shop back into business, back into profit, and back into somewhere that you want to be there, and you want other customers coming in, and you want to be successful. So it's saying that we're in a shop, but we're not stock taking. But what we do know is we're not being a very successful business. So it says a business which takes no regular inventory, and again, that's where where the other steps 10 and 11 come in, that we're taking regular inventory. But as you take regular inventory, you actually become better at it, and that's the great news, that this is also about development. So it's asking you to start the process, but you're going to develop and you'll become a better and better shopkeeper, and become more successful, and it become more exciting as you go. And so it's saying the step 4 is a business that takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged and unsaleable goods. So it's saying there's a lot of other objects to this, and you'll discover them as you go. But at the beginning, we're trying to discover like the stinky, rotten, the most extreme stuff. We're looking at the problems. So, when you're doing an inventory, you tend to be looking at the problems, and it can make people feel a bit upset and a bit hurt because we're only initially looking at the problems. But, and you often say to them, well, look, why don't you do an inventory of all the good things in your life? So it's just an equally as valuable part of a stock take is to look at the good things that you've got. And we've all got good things in our life that that are being overshadowed by the not so good things. So it's not, when we're doing this, we're not saying that you're all bad. It's just that the good things in your life aren't probably causing you problems like the bad things. So we're trying to look for it says the damaged or the unsaleable goods, because we want to get rid of them promptly, it says, without regret. So we want to be able to find what in our life is causing us issues, and it's kind of like changing your value system. That I'm going to stop valuing these behaviours. In actual fact, like we learn from the On Awakening, I want to be divorced from them. I want to realise that when I start ordering, my stock in, I want some of that stuff off the stock list. I don't want it on a progressive order. I've got one of them with Amazon at the minute. For some reason, I sort of push the button and I keep getting the same order coming up, and it's like there seems to be no way of stopping it. And So it's like there's things that we're constantly ordering, which again, for us as personally, that's the areas of our life where we're just reacting. And again, we have to become conscious of that reacting before we can say, look, you cannot change what you don't accept. You cannot change what you don't accept. If you've got a pen and paper, honestly, I'd write that down and I would really learn that simple statement. You cannot change what you cannot accept. It's universally impossible. And so, as we accept that we're reacting, now the other people might be wrong, but when we accept we're reacting, then we start becoming conscious of that reaction. And when we accept that, we can start diffusing that reaction, and then that no longer becomes part of our experience. And instead of that reaction, that automatic reaction that was probably set in childhood, we start replacing it with a thought that's more in line with my new life, a decision that's more in line with my spiritual beliefs, rather than a reaction based on my hurt and on my hate and on my pain that was set in me years ago. So it's quite nice actually when you actually realize, my God, I'm just reacting here, I'm just responding. When you actually capture that, because when you're actually doing that, then you start complaining about the outcome. And then when you actually capture it and change it and put a better thought or better decision in there, then you're going to get better outcomes, which is again what hopefully we're all looking for, is to be more satisfied with our lives, to be more satisfied with ourselves, and to be more satisfied with our outcomes. So it says, one of the objects is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. So it is about putting values on things. What I found is I stopped caring about things that I used to care about, that I shouldn't have been caring about. And then I started caring about things that I should have been caring about. And I started giving more value to, people and time, and just started giving different value to things, and other things that would seem to be important to me that I used to give great value to, I don't give any value to at all. And so I don't give them any time. And value is a very important thing about this. I mean, ultimately, the reason that we have that feeling of inferiority or feeling of not good enough is because we've not felt valued. So ultimately, this idea of valuing is very important. And again, hopefully we can get more into that as we go along, and that how important it is for us to feel valued, and how important it is for other people to feel valued in our life. In actual fact, I think as human beings, we've been given this wonderful power by God, that I've learned that whatever I love and give value to, I bring the best out in it. Whether that's children, whether that's other people, whether that's my hair, my car, my teeth, anything that I love and give value to, I bring the best out in it. And the opposite happens. Anything I don't give value to, I bring the worst out in it. If I don't value my tools and I leave them out in the rain, I don't get the best out of them. But if I look after it, I get the best out of it. So that's another little top tip there that I've learned. And so it says we did exactly that with our lives. We took stock honestly. First thing, we sorted out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestation. So again, remember, this is a hunt for self. This is to become conscious of self so we can start becoming free from it. So we can start becoming divorced from it. And that's why it says you can't kid yourself about values. Some of that self you're going to be so accustomed to, you may not want to let go of it. Like I say, when you've been a sponsor for a while, people call up and go, oh, I've got consequences. And you say, well, there are consequences to your actions. And they're like, oh, but I like the actions. And it's like, well, then you need to keep the consequences. Or take painkiller, which I don't suggest. But that doesn't change the pain. It just means you're not feeling it, but your life still carries on getting shit when you're on painkiller. So it says we consider the common manifestations, and this is the bit I wanted to get to today, because again, hopefully you can still carry on with your on awakenings, and we haven't got through the day bit of that yet, but it's saying resentment is the #1 offender. Resentment is the #1 offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. It's the biggest problem we have to face in sobriety. The biggest problem we have to face in sobriety is resentment. It's the #1 killer. It'll either kill you physically or it'll kill you spiritually. Because it says from it stem all forms of spiritual disease. We've not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. And so I'm going to leave that there. But again, I want you to consider resentment. And tomorrow, we're going to go a little bit deeper into resentment as the #1 offender, the biggest killer.